JM in the AM, Friday morning broadcast here at 91.1 FM, 90.1 FM in the Catskills, on the web, jmintheam.org. Senator Schumer is in fact with us live via telephone. I remind my audience that I saw Senator Schumer over this past weekend and told him in order to avoid one of our public spats, we must talk about the Hagel nomination. He told me he'd be meeting with Hagel, which of course we know at this point that he did already, and I begged him that even if he met with him, he should wait out the process and not make any drastic decisions too quickly. We know that hours after the meeting, Senator Schumer went ahead and endorsed the nomination of Chuck Hagel for Defense Secretary. Senator Schumer, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome back to JM and the AM.
Nachum, it's good to be with you, and sorry I couldn't get on sooner. As you probably know, I'm chairman of the inauguration. I have to make sure that's going right. I'm in the car now. I went home last night to get my last load of clothes to bring down to Washington.
I know you have a flight.
I'm on an 8 o'clock flight.
Right.
I told you I'd come on your show. I was going to do it next week, but you've been hocking me a chinik, so here I am.
Well, you're a man of your word. We said we should do it this week, and you and your staff made sure we would. So, Senator, I am sure you understand why so many, probably the majority of this audience, is angry at the president for this nomination. Let me ask you that. Do you, in fact, sympathize and understand why so many people in the pro-Israel community do not like the Obama nomination of Hagel?
Well, look, as is clear, I had my doubts about Chuck Hagel, and in fact made them public on the Meet the Press show. It got all over the press that Schumer, is throwing some cold water on this nomination. And that was before he was nominated. The president asked me to meet with him before I made any decision. That was only fair. Because I had lots of concerns that everybody has based on his statements, almost all of which are they're basically in the 2005, 2007 time.
Right.
I sat down with him for 90 minutes, and I asked him many, many probing questions. I asked him point blank these questions about Iran, about Israel and the Palestinians, about Hezbollah, about Hamas, all the things that I've spent my life, standing for and fighting for. And his answers were not pat, were not check the box. Nachum, I've been in politics 37 years, and I've been fooled on occasion, but not too often. I think I have a pretty good, as they call it, BS detector. And he was sincere. He basically said, look, the bottom line is the world has changed since 2005, 6, and 7. Iran is far more dangerous and far more militant than it was then. Everyone would agree with that. George Bush wasn't shutting down Iran in 2005, 6, and 7. He said Hamas and Hezbollah are closer to Iran and more militant and worse. And my positions are these. And he enunciated them, and I made them public afterwards. He said, not only should the military option lay on the table in terms of Iran, but if, he said these point blank, then I said, and what if there is no choice but a military option or a nuclear Iran, that the sanctions fail? We all hope they'll succeed, but they could well fail. And he said, then we have no choice but to take action.
Right. But the bigger issue, Senator, and this is what I mentioned to you, son, that at least the bigger issue to me at this moment is the speed with which you endorsed his nomination. I mean, there is going to be a process, and there's going to be a committee asking a lot of questions, and no doubt he'll be giving a lot of answers. What if there's a revelation during that week or whatever period of time it takes, which is not satisfactory to you, which really gets you scared, which raises a red flag to a very important part of your constituency?
Okay, let me say this, Nachum. I said to him, I asked him these questions, he gave me the explanations, I asked him in yes or no fashion, so there was no wiggle room. I then said to him, I am going to make this public, and you're going to be asked these very same questions at the hearing. And he said, I will answer them in exactly the same way. So I think it actually helps the process. Now, he satisfied my concerns. I'll be watching him, like an eagle. I will be on top of not just him, but the administration, as I've been before, as you know, Nachum. People say, well, Schumer wants to curry favor with the administration. Well, look, I'm a Democrat, and obviously I believe whether the president's a Democrat or Republican, you give him the benefit of the doubt of the choice. But when I'm different, when I disagree with them, I make it public. I think I'm the basically the only major Jewish official or any official who has disputed their view of Israel and Palestine. In other words, whatever you think of settlements, whatever you think of borders, the reason there's no peace is because the Palestinians don't want to recognize a Jewish state.
And lucky for us, you used this show to do it, which was...
Yes, I did. I did.
Right.
So you know and your listeners know. In this case, Hagel convinced me that he had changed his views. Not that his statements of the past were acceptable, that the world had changed, and he had changed with them.
So
make one more point, Nachum.
Yeah.
This is an important point. God forbid we have to use the military option, and we may, to prevent a nuclear Iran. We are going to need a unified administration, Jewish community, and Israel. For Israel to do this alone would be far less effective and worse than doing it, if God forbid it has to happen, in concert with the U.S. And this is the worst time to have a real schism. And it's not an accident that neither AIPAC, which is stalwart for Israel, I've worked with them for all the 30 years I've been in Congress, or AJC, or even Abe Foxman, did not come out against Hagel.
So this reluctance, which some have described, will weaken the pro-Israel community and render it obsolete. You don't agree with that?
Look, no, I think that the bottom line is we have to watch everything that happens over the next 6 months to a year. These are crucial times for Eretz Yisrael, very, very carefully. But I think if Hagel has truly changed his positions, which I believe he has, based on a long and probing conversation that I told him I would make public, so it's not whispering quietly, and that now he knows, given what I've done publicly, he will be asked at the hearings, and I know from my colleagues that they will ask him these questions. I think that I made the right choice, and I knew I'd get flack. Frankly, to your audience, the easy choice, in a certain sense, was to just say no, because I know how people feel.
Or at least...
I'm around in the community. I thought for the future of Israel, even with the doubts I had before, and the earlier statements, which are painful to me, that Hagel made, that given that I truly believe he has changed, and the need for close cooperation, this was the right decision.
I know you only have 2 minutes, but let me ask this. You mentioned the attitude toward military action, how it's now not off the table in Hagel's opinion based on your conversation, and a change of attitude. And we saw his apology regarding the Israel lobby comments, etc. But he did oppose on at least 3 occasions, he opposed as a senator U.S. sanctions against Iran. Has he changed his position on that matter as well?
Only would he support unilateral. I asked him, for instance, let us say we do further isolation and say no oil for Iran, things like that, which we could do. He said he'd be supportive. And let me just say one other thing. As I mentioned, as you know, I have my disagreements with the president on Middle East policy, and I'm not afraid to state them. On Iran, I believe the president's resolute. I've spent time with him. I believe the President Obama does not want as his legacy, one of his legacies, a nuclear Iran. I believe that he doesn't want for 4 years of his term to have an Iran with a nuclear weapon brandishing it around the Middle East. And I believe he is resolute. And so I think that, that, again, you weigh everything together, and he did say on sanctions that he would be for unilateral sanctions. He fully supports the sanctions. He thinks they've been effective economically. Whether they have the actual effect we need, which is to get Iran to back off, remains to be seen. We got to keep squeezing.
All right, you just mentioned the administration. I'm trying to keep my
last question.
Yeah, I know you kept your commitment, and I want to keep my commitment about the time constraints. So, last question then: how do you react when the President of the United States says publicly that Israel is not acting in its own best interest?
Well, when I disagree with that, I publicly say that, and I do over and over again. As I've said on the settlements, even recently, settlements are not the reason we don't have peace in the Middle East.
The president,
Palestinians don't want to recognize a Jewish state.
The president said it this week. Can I assume you're against what he said?
I don't know what instance you're referring to.
In reference to the Israeli election, he said Netanyahu is not acting in Israel's best interest.
I'm not familiar with that statement. I've been busy with other things. I'd have to get back.
Senator, good luck on Monday, and thank you for keeping your commitment and joining us.
Thank you, and good Shabbos to all your listeners.
Shabbat shalom to you as well. There he is, Senator Charles Schumer. We asked for an opportunity to have him address his endorsement of the Hagel nomination here on JM and the AM to an audience that is not very much in favor of what the president did nominating Chuck Hagel, and to address the speed with which he went and endorsed the nomination of Chuck Hagel. And I thank the senator for keeping that commitment and joining us here at JM in the AM. Friday morning broadcast at 91.1 FM, 90.1 FM in the Catskills, on the web, jmandtheam.org.